name's James Collins, and yes, I'm talking about Star Wars a little bit today. There's just parallels with modern software development and Star Wars. So yeah, we've already had my bio. Yes, you already have my bio. We yes, we work for IBM. We used to work on mainframes, and I work for J9, Webster, and a lot of their containerized solutions. So, who's sort of soda-type there? Anybody? Not soda cube, not soda source. Soda-type. Okay. Well, you probably know as if you use Java because we've run making Central. So pretty much all your open source stuff comes from Central. We can run it back for probably about 12 years now. It runs on AWS and you might have cloud built up cheapness. But we do lots of other stuff as well. So the guy who created Soda-type, he essentially created Payment with a few other people. So that is created some of these, Deckers repository, lifecycle, things like that. So what we're going to talk about today. I am struggling through my laptop. That actually broke yesterday, so I can't really see my screen. So I'm going to have to tell you wrap stuff over there. But yes, we're going to talk about open source and how good parallel with the devs club, providing on the small, the initial driven or basically what software composition analysis, some security that we have to worry about with open source code, and then summarize CM. So open source and the desktop. I presume you're all familiar with Star Wars. There you are. So what I'm going to do is draw parallels between Star Wars, what the Empire did with the Death Star, and how we do modern software development. So how the Death Star was constructed? Well, essentially the Death Star is made up of lots of things, right? It's a very, very technical engineering feat. They essentially had different owners coming from almost different planets and colonies. These owners were then transported across the galaxy to build the Death Star. Then they were together at a location of the Uber tubing. Then once the builders cleaned and tested, would like destroy the planet, which is what they did in Star Wars with the Death Star. And when a planet is destroyed and they're happy, there'll be minute production, right? So applications nowadays, how we build them. So these applications are made up of lots of open source dependencies, which come from all over the world, right? These dependencies are transported across the world to like development environments. And then we then put them together. So if you're in the Java world, you might use Maven or Rail, and we'll put them together and you'll build your application. Then we'll test our application. Hopefully you're not building applications that destroy planets. Please don't do that. But we'll test our application. And then when our team lead is happy, we'll put it into production. So what are the similarities between modern application development and the Death Star? Well, open source committers are pretty much like planets and the colonies that are building the different parts of the Death Star. Like I mentioned, dependencies are these components that we all together. Application testing is basically what we do, so like firing the weapon. And this guy, as you can see, the evil emperor is a bit like Cat Team Lead, right? Being the person, then the person that decides that it gets put into production or doesn't get put into production. So what's missing? What's missing from modern application development? What was missing from building the Death Star? Well, we'll go back to that in a moment. Now we're going to talk about why open source code things, right? So open source is not a new thing. Open source has been around since 1953, that first ever open source system. So it's been around a very, very long time. Open source really got popular with things like Maven Central, GitHub. These allow us to share code very, very quickly. It allows us to then innovate. So we don't have to focus on all these little parts of the application that people have done before us. We can just build the application and focus on the innovation part, right? One of the best, I think, things that helps, well, the best open source bits of code I think I've ever seen is Android, right? Android is amazing. It's the open source operating system. And yeah, creates a value. So why do we have open source? Well, we have the freedom, you can see up there, basically study, copy, redistribute, and modify. And there are lots of people working at this code base from all over the planet. You've got lots of different mentalities that are now looking to innovate better. Hopefully increase security, but I would go over why that's not the case all the time. Generally, open source code is free. We download it, we use it free. We had to pay for all the libraries and copying wouldn't. And yeah, having all these people with all these different mindsets all over the planet as scouting like quicker. So we did a study to see how much of modern applications are open source code. We're now looking at 90%. So 90% of the applications we put into production is open source code. We derive that somewhere around the planet write that code, and we're just hoping everything's great, everything works. But that can have lots of problems. So what are these problems? Well, first of all, if you're in the Java space, an average Java project will have around 150 dependencies. Those dependencies will have about 10 different releases per year. So now we have 1,500 updates to consider for all our applications in Java, right? And it's the same in lots of other language ecosystems where we're using open source. Now, we pull down, this is Spring Boot Web. We pull down, for example, one dependency. That dependency pulls down more dependencies and more and more and more, and so on, right? So it's not just the health of the first dependency we need to worry about, it's all the other dependencies that come with it. And there is a lot beyond the applications. And times have changed, right? So before, most people were using hackers in the basement trying to essentially break into our firewalls. Well, our firewalls are pretty secure nowadays. It's very, very difficult for them to break through these things. But they're not targeting our firewalls anymore. They're targeting, for example, the source repositories. So they're trying to get vulnerabilities and malware into those, into our build tools. Because even though our applications are built 90% of open source, so are all the tools we use. So there's lots of different ways that bad people could try and attack us and get into our system. And we've all probably heard microservices, right? This architecture everyone's trying to do nowadays. Well, that doesn't make things easier. Before, we had to worry about one application and its dependencies. Now we might have to worry about 5, 10, 50 applications. So not only do we have to keep our dependencies up to date and secure in one application, now we've got to do it with lots of microservices. Yeah, it just makes our life easy to try one and they do. So similar problems that face the Death Star. So basically what happened with the Death Star is, in Star Wars, obviously, you've got many components. They're all built to remote locations all across the galaxy, right? Keeping track of how they're built and the quality of those components is very, very difficult for the Empire. And the Death Star is very, very complex, right? As vulnerability testing was kind of masterful, the Empire was there going, we have no vulnerabilities, no one can destroy us. Look at our magnificent machine. And they were obviously gone. And it kind of goes back when the rebels decided to attack and they decided to try and destroy the Death Star. They realized very, very late that was a vulnerability. And it was so late that they couldn't stop rebels from destroying the Death Star. So it's kind of similar to what we have now, right? Very, very similar. I mean, the days of where we had lots of time to fix a vulnerability are far gone. And what do we think about when we think of open source code? Well, I can try to do 3 categories, right? We have quality, security, and licensing. I'll go through those in a bit more details, but there's lots of open source projects out there that can help us with some of these bits. So, for example, scorecards. These are agents. So something that Agent SSF have created. It's essentially a way for us to examine the health of the projects and the open source dependencies that we're consuming. So it gives us a good idea whether what was the entire application is good and what isn't good, right? And there's lots of different ways of doing this. Scorecard is just one. There's lots of different ways. If you are contributors of open source, you can help improve your project's score. But these things will be pinnacle in the future. A lot of people will make decisions on what they are putting into their applications based on health of these projects. So that helps with the health of our projects. You may have seen this slide before. I've tweeted it a little bit, so it says it's patchy helicopters now, but this is the scary part of cybercrime, right? So in 2016, cybercrime surpassed the drug trade. Cybercrime was making more money than all the drug trade in the whole world. That's a lot of money. So that's there. That's $450 billion US dollars a year, right? That's $14,000 US dollars a second. I mean, I don't even want to calculate how much that is since I started this presentation. And that's equivalent to 12,857 Apache helicopters. That is a lot of Apache helicopters, right? I wouldn't want to go up against an army or an air force that has that many helicopters. Now, I've got data from 2022. Do we think that's got worse? Of course it's got worse. It's got a lot worse. If we look at 2022, cybercrime is now estimated in 2 years ago to be $6 trillion US dollars, right? That is 200,000 US dollars a second, and that is equivalent to 171,428 Apache helicopters. I don't think there's actually helicopters in the world, let alone Apache helicopters. So is a crazy, crazy amount to put in. I threw this slide in last year, but if slide prime was the GDP of a country, it would be the third largest GDP on the planet. I actually had to swap into your UK round, so this guy took over as last year in terms of GDP. So it is accurate, well, from 2022. But that's a lot of money, right? And if we now fast forward to 2024, it's now estimated at 9 trillion US dollars. So this is growing massively. Now, drug dealers, they get caught. They get caught, they get put in prison, they get shot. We all saw what happened to Pablo Escobar, right? Now, if he was alive today, he would probably be in the cybercrime trade because cyber criminals don't get caught. They're usually stuck in basements and it's very, very rare or fine. But what can 9 trillion US dollars buy? Well, it can buy you salary for a year in the US, 162 billion teachers for 1 year. It can do about 6,000 celebrity divorce settlements if the ones doing that, for example. It can buy you a hell of a lot of Priuses, 377 million. Or it can buy you 11.9 million trillion chocolate bars. A lot of chocolate, right? And these cyber criminals, they're attacking us, they're taking our chocolate away, which is not good. And this came from IBM. And say in 2006, we had on average 45 days to get to vulnerability that was in our code. Whereas what we saw with Multi-J, 2021, if you're familiar with that, we had less than a day to do that. So the days are gone where we can rely on the vulnerability being about, and we had time to fix it. We don't anymore. People are going to start attacking this straight away. Now, as we run Maintenance Central, we can see what countries around the world download this tolerable version of Multi-J. We know exactly who's downloaded it, right? Not the exact person, not the exact company, but we can see geographically where it's been downloaded. And for an example, humans are a very reactive race, unfortunately. We like to react to things rather than be proactive. So, for example, I had a graph, definitely on me, but we had a graph that showed the different countries and how much they were downloading of the most vulnerable Java version in history. And taken, for example, Taiwan, they were one of the worst at downloading this vulnerable version. Of course, when it was announced, countries like China started attacking Taiwan in terms of they were hacking them as much as they could. Now, funny enough, Taiwan is one of the best countries in the world for not downloading this vulnerable version, right? And that's just humans in a nutshell. Well, this is we'll fix the climate crisis, but we'll fix it being so bad, people are dying and it's costing everyone money. And that's just humans in a nutshell. But we can't do this with open source code. I mean, open source code is now in insulin pumps. These things are keeping people alive. It's in aircraft. It's in self-driving cars. It's in trains, right? We cannot afford for these things to be hacked because people will die, okay? And that's changing quite a lot. Governments around the world are waking up to this. For example, I had a vehicle. I was named manufacturer. It's a German manufacturer, very well known. And it had a defect. And the defect was, if I turn the steering wheel too quickly, the airbag will go off. Right? This is a new car. And if I turn that steering wheel too quickly, the airbag went on. So I was driving around very carefully for months until they recalled the vehicle, which they did. But we have legislation in manufacturing to say that if it's something dangerous like that, it needs to be reported. Whereas we cannot have the same legislation in software, but that is completely changed. So will legislation help the empire not be destroyed? Probably not. It was the empire that didn't really care about legislation. I did a bit of research. The only funny bit of legislation I found was the Imperial Building Code, which was really around Emperor Palpatine's secret escapes and passages for him to escape if anything happens, right? But like I mentioned, legislation is coming. For example, the United States now have legislation that requires software bill of material to be provided to anyone who's selling to a government entity. And it's also putting liability on the software manufacturers, the software companies, us that are building the software, that if that software goes wrong, we are now liable for that, right? Same with in the EU, they are putting in similar legislation. Theirs goes a bit further, in my opinion. Basically, what they're mandating in the EU is that anyone who contributes to open source code is liable. So, for example, I work with Sonatype. I could contribute to an open source project. If Sonatype doesn't use that project, it's something I do in my spare time, Sonatype is liable for anything that goes wrong with that open source project, right? If that is incorporated by a different company into piece of software that's running an aircraft and that aircraft breaks and goes down, I and Sonatype are now legally liable for that. So there are a lot of extremes, a lot of governments. I know India has legislation coming out as well around this stuff. So being prepared and make sure you're clued up on the legislation, because some of this legislation might be going too far. And in my opinion, the EU is going to hinder open source innovation in Europe, because nobody's going to want to commit to open source if they're now going to be liable for anything that goes wrong, right? But the legislation is there for a big reason. It's there to protect people. It protects basically anything that our software goes into. And so it should. I mean, we're all software engineers, right? I mean, we're going to be probably the last people working on the planet, unfortunately. We'll all be way dead before that. Don't worry about it. But our job is to learn to make an air everyone outside the top. It's going to take a very long time for robots to building houses. But I don't know if you've seen Boston Dynamics robots. They currently can build houses, right? They can move bags of tools around. They can hammer stuff next to walls. Yes, it's not cost effective yet for us to replace builders with robots that can do it. But 50 years down the line, 60 years, 100, 150 years, we will start replacing everybody out of a job. So unfortunately here, everybody, we're going to be the last people working on the, and we're going to be changing these machines go. And software licensing is also important, but so a lot of people don't think about this. And you've probably seen in the news a lot of companies transitioning away from fully open source licensing, right? And they're doing it. It's quite sad if you're an open source contributor and you're in the open source world to see them move to being called restricted licenses, but they're doing it for good reasons. I won't name the companies, but there was a cloud provider that took another company's open source product, which they spent millions and millions on R&D building, and they put it on their cloud for free. That they did it on their cloud, and they were charging people for it and not giving this company anything back. So this is the reason a lot of companies are now changing their licensing to essentially be a bit more restricted, so people can't take advantage of the free code and all the R&D they've done. So summary of a software license is it's essentially a document that sets out permissions on the software you can use, right? These permissions are basically set there to kind of help protect the intellectual property of the open source software. And some of the main points of the licenses are if it can be copied, modified, redistributed, how it can be used, how it can be installed, any copyrights, the patents around it. And it can also say the duration you use it for. So I imagine a lot of you consume open source and don't ever check the licensing, right? So licensing is very, very important. Now, if it's a public domain license, like an MIT license, it can be nice and unrestricted. But if we move across the license pattern to more proprietary stuff, it can get very, very restricted. To the point, if we consume some open source code with more proprietary licensing, it can have statements in there that say, we have to open source our software that we put it in. Imagine a lot of our companies make money off what we sell, what we build. And you will go along, consume an open source license, and now all of a sudden you immediately have to open source everything you've built and give it away for free. So licensing is very, very important in terms of open source. And what could go wrong? Well, you could end up being sued for financial liability by the creator of that component because you haven't abided by their license. You might have to rewrite massive parts of your product. And you can publish your software as open source. You would have to do it. It's licensing. And you get penalties and restrictions. And people in this space, people are not going to buy your software if you're breaking the law by including this open source stuff. So some licenses we've noticed that have moved away from less restrictive stuff was like Terraform, MongoDB, Redis, Confluent. They've had to do this because people are taking advantage of their nice nature, providing this stuff free. Now, some of their licensing are pretty restrictive and you're still using development purposes, but a lot of these licenses are stating now that you can't make money off that software without giving us it back, right? Which makes sense. So, composition analysis. I like to use a cake analogy for this. It's nice and easy to understand. What is it? So SCA for short, composition analysis. It's a way of looking at your applications, your libraries, and making sure that there's nothing bad in there, right? So it's basically analyzing them. So, for example, I've got a tape. Imagine I've got my Java application, that's my main POM file. I can see this tape is sponge, there's icing, and some fruit, right? So I know this tape is made up of those. But I don't know what the sponge is made out of. I don't know where it came from. I don't know if the egg was brought free range, if they're produced in a restricted way where they're harming animals. So that's kind of like the same analogy that you have with software, right? So a basic software composition analysis tool will tell you what dependencies you've got, maybe if there's a new version of it. Whereas advanced tools will give you little dependencies that dependency falls in. That's people persistent dependencies. It can give you vulnerability and licensing data. It can tell you the health of your open source dependency you're pursuing. So SEA is really, really important. And if you're not doing it, you should be analyzing your software and your applications as well. Yeah. Now, would have SEA helped the Death Star? Probably. It might have been able to identify a little bit quicker the vulnerability that they found, and that the Redlands took advantage of and destroyed the Death Star. And basically, would they care about licensing data? Probably not. They didn't care about anything. They'd kill everyone. But it's the same with the Death Star, right? If they had paid a bit more attention to what who was building what, the health of their dependencies, what was going into the Death Star, maybe it wouldn't have been destroyed. Okay? So has anyone heard of an SBOT? These are quite serious. Okay, so like I was mentioning, legislation coming into the US, Europe, pretty sure in India as well, stating you need to provide and software bill of materials to the government if you're selling them software, right? So what a software bill of materials is, it's essentially a document which tells me exactly what is in the application you're shipping, what dependencies are in there, what versions they are. And it's a great way to identify if you're buying some software, what is in that. Does it have vulnerabilities? And the reason governments are mandating this is it basically gives them a document of a timestamp, what you're shipping to them, exactly what this thing's like, right? Now, there's no excuse for not making SBOMs because you can make some plug into every part of the software development lifecycle. You can use it with the Maven plugin. Kubernetes has a plugin for it. Microsoft has a plugin for it. There's loads of different ways to do this, right? So there's really no excuse for not having SBOMs. But I think the trouble comes is when the government is SBOMs, how we manage them. So having a tool, so Sonatype had a tool called SBOM Manager. There's lots of different tools out there you can use, but essentially what this will do is I've got all the applications I've built, I've got all the applications that I'm bought and I use it, and they all come with a software bill of materials. I can put it into something like this, and it will tell me what vulnerabilities are in all those applications and where to find them. So as you were ever working when the Log4j thing came around, it was a big scrambler to figure out where the most vulnerable Java dependency history was in our applications. People were rushing around, it's around Christmas time, and everyone was rushing around to figure out where it was hidden, right? So having something like this helps a lot because we can figure out pretty quickly which one of our applications we're bugging. Now, security posture makes a very, very big difference. A lot of these foundations and organizations did not exist 10 years ago. And that is because governments around the world are starting to react, like I said, to all the security vulnerabilities and all that stuff that's in our applications. Now, if you're an open source committer, or if you're someone who contributes to open source, and if you're not, you should, because we like to consume it, but we don't like to give back, so try and give back. But there's very, very simple ways to essentially figure out. We can identify very quickly if it's a healthy or non-healthy open source project. But really, really simple ways that we can do this is stuff, for example, have branch protection, protect your branches. Don't have dependencies paid into a specific version, because you may have a version that's not vulnerable today, but there are new vulnerabilities that come out every day. Most Chinese use the National Vulnerability Database, which is provided by the US government, to identify where vulnerabilities are in open source code. Now, currently, there is a massive backlog on the National Vulnerability Database, which I think is months long, which means there are lots and lots of vulnerabilities that are just not being installed yet. Sonatype itself has its own database, so we can tune theirs, but we have actually fixed 33% of that database because it's just bad and wrong. So there's lots of tools that will allow us to do this, but again, do pay attention to what's in your application because the small things make a big difference. So like I mentioned, code reviews. that is a big thing that scorecards use to seeing if your project is healthy. Like I mentioned, binaries outside your project, dependencies akin to a specific version, having secure branches. These are things that will boost an open source project's health quite too often. And the software supply chain is very much like the normal supply chain, suppliers, which is open source. We have our warehouses, it looks like our factory, the next repository. We have our software development teams, which are manufacturers. And then we have our finished good, which is the application we their production. Now, small things can make big impacts. So the difference between this line of code and this line of code is a vulnerability, right? That is all it takes for a vulnerability to get out there. Now, a lot of people ask things like, why did you run Maven Central? Why don't you take down the vulnerabilities? Well, a vulnerability is not malicious. It wasn't malicious and put there. It was done there by only mistake. And that is why it's out there in the world. We do take down malware. Maven Central doesn't have any malware inside it, okay? I can't say that for the other ecosystems. Python, for example, is absolutely full of malware if you go to their repository. So you've got to be very, very careful. There's even services now you can go and use online and pay money and they will generate malware for you, right? So we've got to pay a lot of attention to basically what we're consuming. So this is a long summary of the first secret weapon we had in Java is Maven Central. Now, when Maven Central was created, it was, we made it so you had to own the domain, right? So you have to, if you're uploading something to Apache, you have to own or .apache.blah, blah, blah to upload something there. So having that restriction has enabled us to stop a lot of bad stuff essentially is getting in, right? And there's lots of different ways people attack repositories. So you've got typo squatting is where I will upload a dependency with a very, very similar name. So one character difference. I'm typing along and I accidentally misspell the dependency I'm trying to download because I put my Maven pop file. And now I've downloaded a vulnerable dependency, right? Open source repo attacks are quite common and people are attacking them constantly. We're actually quite good because, again, you have to own the domain, but still, there is always a chance that someone could steal the domain off Apache and then they could upload whatever it is, right? So that's always a challenge. I mentioned build tool attacks. So every build tool we're using now is all built with open source stuff. So people are trying to get malware and vulnerabilities into the build tools. And we've also got dependency confusion. So someone could upload something with version 99999. We go down, pull down latest, and now all of a sudden we have some malware, right? But for Maven Central, that's pretty secure because, again, can't upload something with a long version number if basically you don't own the domain. So Maven Central, we pretty much stop typo squatting and dependency confusion. Whilst we can't stop people stealing other people's credentials and pretending to be Apache, or we can't stop builder tools with their malware. But with a lot of respect in Java, we are quite protected. Like I said, in the Node ecosystem, the Python ecosystem, it is absolutely full of malware and vulnerabilities. So it's very, very difficult. Another thing is we can't pull this stuff down if it's got a vulnerability in because a lot of builds around the world require deep dependencies. Now in Java, we only get a vulnerability if we get the line of code with the vulnerability in it, right? Whereas in Node, for example, you do an npm install, they can run into something, and all of a sudden you've got a malware vulnerability. So again, Java, we're pretty safe in a lot of regards, but we're not immune to bad stuff. So the second secret weapon is order, right? So like I mentioned, because you've got Maven Central, we can see how many people download what. And this was about 6 months after, again, the worst Java vulnerability in history was announced. After 6 months, there was 51 million downloads of that vulnerability. There's 33% all Log4j downloads were the most vulnerable version in history. Do you reckon that got better? And I'm going to fast forward a year and a half. Do you reckon there's less? It's still 33%, 33% of downloads of the worst Java vulnerability in history. They're still downloading it. We are now at 354 million downloads of this, the worst vulnerability ever. And there's no excuse for any, right? Because we did some research and for 96% of vulnerable downloads, there was a non-vulnerable version available. So we're doing this to ourselves, essentially. We're making ourselves insecure. And it's okay if it's a massive conglomerate. Yeah, they could probably pay for it. If you're in a bank, they might be able to pay for it. But if you're a small to medium-sized company, that can be the difference between you going bankrupt and not going bankrupt. So you may think, oh, it's a white problem, it's a company problem, but it will be your problem if you don't have a job, right? So it's very, very important we pay attention to all the libraries we're downloading. So what I want to just kind of think about in terms of this is, first of all, choose your dependencies wisely, right? So first of all, analyze what's inside your application. That's the first step. Look at your existing applications, see what open source dependencies you're using, find a tool that'll give you some insights into if they've got vulnerabilities or not. Found a continuous upgrade strategy. You don't want to be stuck on version because, like I mentioned, there's a backlog in the National Vulnerability Database, which is MOX1. And you may have something now that is not vulnerable, which in 2 months, they announce that there's a big vulnerability in it. So you need a way to constantly keep for your stuff upgrading. Have ongoing security scanning. So just because it's not vulnerable when I'm developing it in production, it might be later on in a day or two. So have constant scanning in production, your development environments, make sure there's nothing vulnerable in it. And have a remediation strategy, right? When these horrible vulnerabilities are announced, have a plan to fix this. Don't just sit there and scramble around. I remember when I was working at IBM and it happens, and a lot of people didn't go home for Christmas because they had to fix a lot of different things. Now, Webster, the product I worked on, luckily, didn't actually consume Log4j, but it was all in our testing infrastructure. It was in lots of different places. So we still had to sit there and basically unpick it bit by bit and figure out where the vulnerabilities work. And again, there's lots of different ideas. So if you go to Made in Central, we've got a safety rating there as well. So the best protection is to make wise decisions early. It's not about consuming the open source and then essentially worrying about it later. Pick libraries and open source projects that are not vulnerable to begin with, that like LSP, that have lots of reviews. So I want to know if the vulnerability comes out, how quickly that open source code is fixed. If it takes months to fix it, that's probably not a good open source library to use. If it sticks within a week or a few days, that's good. That means there's lots of people working on it and you know it's going to be nice and it's good. And third thing is sonotype. So this is kind of what we did. A lot of people asked us how we made any money because we run Made in Central, like I said. I think it's something like we served a 3 trillion downloads now. It's now getting to the point where it's like 1 trillion downloads per year, something crazy. But Sonotype had a suite of products. It's not just Sonotype, if you use any company's products, but essentially Lifecycle was the monitoring thing I mentioned. Fine will stop stuff coming down, and repository is basically a storage thing. So make sure you're monitoring at all points the development lifecycle. For when you tune it, when you build it on your local machine, your source control, when you release it and operate it, make sure there's something there that's always monitoring and build lifecycle. So the demise of the empire, how it fell, how it got destroyed. Well, it's a kind of related a bit to Log4j, right? It's very simple. We found out very late that there's vulnerability in Log4j, although it did hide in there for quite a while. And if they paid a bit more attention to the different parts of the galaxy that were building these components, maybe it would have been destroyed. Maybe the Empire would defeat the rebels. Who knows? So with that, I finished very, very quickly here today, which, again, I'll give you all time to thank. But just want to end, long live software engineers. May we bring complexity and confusion to the galaxy as we go. So with that, if you want to find out any more information about this stuff, let me know. The top link is really good. There's a history of all the software supply chain attacks that have happened in the last 15 years. If you want to find the Log4j data, we have a dashboard which is updated, I think, every few days, which will tell you exactly what countries are downloading Log4j, the vulnerable version, and how much. If you want to know more about the legislation that's coming out, the bottom link talks a bit about that. There's lots of ways to get in touch with us. Sonotype, again, I'm going to Brad the feel free to reach out to me. I'm more than happy to answer any little questions. Do check out the new Made in Central. We've given it a facelift. I think that a lot of people started thinking, oh, Sonotype was Made in Central. But yes, we have. We had to update it at some point because it just like it was building 1992. But yes, we have updated it. we had an end before show that we said, oh, how do we get people to realize that we remain central? Maybe we should send out everyone who downloads open source stuff from Main Essential, but they're never going to have to pay for it. That was going to be the end of the show. The board of directors wasn't too happy about that, and they wouldn't let catch post that. But it's one of the things. So it's taught made people realize that we remain central for everyone. I think my colleague have written a break series on FluJay. If you've never been on FluJay before, it's friend open source Java. It's a great place to go. If you want to get into writing articles and blogs, they're always looking for new people. So great stuff on there. So check that out. And last but not least, we do a supply chain report. We do this once a year. We analyze all the public repository, not just for Java, but Python, for Node, for C, etc., about how open source is evolving, how much being consumed. We've also done a lot of research into what companies are doing with AI and machine learning. So do check that out. From that once a year, it's got loads and loads of really good information in it. You want to find my slides, you can find them here. I know a QR code is not the most secure thing in the planet. I do promise you're not going to get vulnerabilities by scanning this, okay? Do bear in mind, I'm not a front-end developer, so the website that has these slides on next was created by me. I am a back-end developer. My wife actually, Shabani, she works for IBM, and she was a front-end developer, so she kind of looked at it and was like, what is this thing you built? I was like, yeah, sorry. So I did have to just go and fix it in the health white blog, so I think that's a better. Yeah, do shout out if you, and all my slides are on there if you want to get them, and Git's obviously live as well. So without further ado, thank you for listening to my talk today. Thanks for staying around at the end of the day.